Well, this is where we start tonight. Gauteng Health MEC Gwen Ramokgopa says that a recovery plan is in place in the wake of that devastating fire that gutted the Bank of Lisbon building in the Johannesburg Central Business District. It claimed the lives of 3 firefighters and left 8 seriously injured. Infrastructure Development MEC Jacob Mamabolo says that heads will roll if it is found that negligence played a role. Areas in and around the building have been cordoned off for safety reasons, and joining us right now for the latest developments around this particular story, here in studio with me, our SABC reporter Nozintombi Miya. Nozintombi, so the story on day 3 now. So what happened today that we haven't heard before?
Well, what I thought was quite interesting that happened today is that the firefighters really are still struggling to damp down specifically the 14th, the 16th and the 15th floors of the Lisbon building. There's still embers that are smoking and that are creating havoc. So they had to then call in the engineers to come in and make sure that they have a look at the structural integrity of those particular floors to make sure that they can still go in and continue with the damping down process of that building. So it's creating a lot more havoc with them in them being able to completely contain that situation. By the time we'd left, about 85% of the building had been doused down and the fire had been contained within those particular areas. But the areas of concern that they still had was from the 14th all the way up to the 16th building, up until the 16th floor of that building.
Nozintombi, we heard the South African National Defence Force, they are on standby should their help be needed. But how many teams do we have converged around that building today?
Today it was only the Johannesburg team. You'll recall that on Wednesday and Thursday there were teams from around the surrounding districts that came in to assist. When we spoke to emergency services earlier today, they said that they'd had a bit of a handle on making sure that the fire was sufficiently doused down. But beyond the actual work of making sure that the building was secure and that the fire had been completely eradicated, it was more about the emotions of it, the trauma of seeing 3 of their colleagues, falling in the line of duty and 8 others injured. And I think that really is why, the Defence Force was positioned there to assist, to provide the assistance that they needed, but also to provide that support, to show the Johannesburg emergency services that they are not alone in fighting such fire.
Nozintombi, earlier today we also heard for the first time from one of the firefighters about the water situation in that Bank of Lisbon building, and the firefighter whom the team spoke to actually said that there was no water in the building.
The building itself was not compliant with health and safety regulations, and it made it extremely difficult for the firefighters to conduct their work. So to paint a picture of what the experience was as the firefighters went in, they got the call that the fire had taken place. Team A rushed in. Once they rushed in, they were able to access the door, but they ended up getting trapped inside the building and didn't have access to go out because there was no fire escape and there was only one entrance in and out of that particular building. Upon assessing the structural integrity of the building inside of where they were, they discovered that there was no access to water. They couldn't access their water pipes, and that created an even bigger challenge. And they only had about 30 minutes of oxygen on their oxygen masks, and they were stranded there for at least 2 hours. It was really a very, very difficult situation for them to be able to go in and effectively do their work.
And just finally, has there been any clarity on the students who were housed in the adjacent building as to what happened to them? Where would they move to?
So we spoke to some of the students when we were on the ground, and what we saw was quite surprising because we saw quite a number of students going back into the building. And when we questioned them and asked them, why are you going back into the building, especially considering that it had been evacuated on Wednesday and Thursday and it still had not been declared safe for Friday, they said they just simply didn't have any other alternative accommodation, and they were not given enough information as to how much longer it would take for emergency services to secure the area for them to be able to go back inside. So it was quite confusing for the students, and they decided, what, we don't have any other alternative accommodation, we're going to go back inside, and if it means that they need to evacuate us later on, then they will evacuate us. But there were some students that were able to leave.
Final question. Where did they sleep last night?
That's different students managed to sleep in different places, but at the moment what we do know is that that particular building, the student building, it's still not safe for them to go in.
Nozintombi Miya, thanks so much for that update. And of course now for further developments with